here we are once again with The Fire Within, the Okanagan's premier entrepreneurship talk show. I'm your host, Joel Young, and I can't help, and those of you viewers who watch the show and have watched me in the past know that anytime I talk about entrepreneurship, I invariably want to get into discussing innovation and creativity. A short time ago, within the last year or two, my daughter, my one and only daughter, mentioned to me in a request form, do I want to go see a business that I knew absolutely nothing about, entitled Float Space? And I said to her, what's Float Space? And she said, well, flotation tanks, which is another shorter explanation for float technology. And that being said, tonight I'd like to introduce my guest, Dustin.
Hello. Dustin
Erickson, who is the owner and operator of Float Space in downtown Kelowna, over by the Landmark buildings. Happy to have you with me tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Joel.
I'd like our viewers to know right from the onset, what is Float Space?
Okay, Float Space is Kelowna's first sensory deprivation or flotation rest center in over 20 years. Sensory deprivation tanks are basically an environment that eliminate all major sources of external stimulation. So you don't really experience gravity very much. It's a weightless saltwater solution, 800 to 1,000 pounds of pure Epsom salt that you float on the very surface of. Yeah, it gets rid of all the tension and the stress physically on the body. Okay, it's completely light proof. Okay, it's completely dark in those tanks. It's also completely silent, can't hear anything. And it's heated to your skin temperature. So when you stop moving, you reach an equilibrium. It's isothermal, and you don't have to spend any metabolic energy thermoregulating. So the combination of these restrictions leaves your body in a very, very beautiful space, and it promotes healing physiologically, mentally, emotionally, and can even bring people to some quite interesting spiritual-like experiences.
I like it already. I keep getting invitations from you.
I'm persistent.
You're persistent and to try it, and I will. When the mood strikes me, I'll be there. It's just like waking up one morning and saying, I'm going to Dustin's to jump in the tank. How did you become involved in this technology, and what led you to becoming an entrepreneur in the Okanagan?
I became an entrepreneur by default, really. I've been a student at UBC for about 6 years now, studying biology. Okay. And like a lot of students in the middle of my degree, I found myself very, very stressed. I was anxious. I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. I was depressed. I was drinking too much. I was doing all sorts of things that were not conducive.
Counterproductive.
Exactly. Yeah, they weren't leading to success really in my life, you know. And that frustration led me to experiencing hot yoga at Moksha in Kelowna. It's one of my favorite places to go. And what I found was that at the end of a yoga class, when your body is so physically tired, you get into this savasana. You're just laying on your back and you just drift off. And that was my favorite part of the class. Okay, so the next logical extension from that was to get more into meditation and self-observation, and that led me to the flotation tank itself. So there weren't a lot around.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yes, I traveled to Surrey and floated in a guy's garden shed in his backyard. It was a homemade wooden tank, and I drove out there, and what was so interesting is in my excitement, I left Kelowna without my wallet. Okay, so I arrive at this guy's house in Surrey. I'm out of gas. My phone is dead, and I have no money. And I just knocked on his door, and I said, hey, I'm here for this float. I'm kind of at the end of my rope here. And he's like, you know, don't worry about it. Come out back. And I'm going, out back? And we get into this rickety white garden shed. And I float for a couple hours, and I get out of the tank. And my host, his name is Ron Ticano, one of the original floaters, 70 years old. He hands me $300. Okay, and he says, you know what, pay me back when you can. but just get yourself home safe and welcome to the float community.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
And the float was amazing. I felt great. I had felt happier than I had been in a long time. My senses were super vibrant, so I could smell better than I usually could. I could see better.
Your senses are
Exactly,
cute, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And but what struck me most, and why I got so passionate about getting into floating and sharing it, was the presence that Ron had was so incredible. He was so at ease, and he was so kind, and that's really what got me excited about floating.
Like a Tibetan monk.
Yeah, yeah, he had that essence to him.
Yeah, yeah.
Such presence. And, you know, on the drive home, I was thinking, you know, we have strong relationships with our environments. And the only thing wrong with that experience and sharing it with a large number of people was the external environment, the fact that it was in a garden shed and at a home. And I knew if I could kind of get into floating and share it with people in a way that would invite a large majority and be friendly and non-intimidating and not as kind of weird, that it would be something that I could get on board with. So I started designing Float Space at that point, and it was a 2-year process to opening our doors.
And sitting with me this evening, how long has Float Space been open?
Since 2014, so we're in our second year now.
Second year now, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your explanation for myself and our viewers. But I can't help but ask you, do you have any experience as an entrepreneur other than the Float Space venture that you have undertaken now? And secondly, as part of it, do you have any family members that are entrepreneurs?
Yeah. In high school, I ran a maintenance company, and I used my dad's green Ford truck, and we called it the Beast. And so I was as skinny as I am today, but I would show up at people's house under Beast maintenance, and I would run landscaping, and I would build patios and stuff like that. And I always knew I wanted to work for myself. And my mom, actually, she ran a kids indoor playground for years called Kid Zone. So I was very close to calling in Calgary.
Oh, in Calgary, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I was very close to calling Float Space Float Zone to kind of give the respect to my mom.
Yeah, no, that would make sense to me too. Other than the maintenance company that your dad had, any other family members or from your parents that are entrepreneurial?
Yeah, my uncle was running Captain Hook Towing in Kelowna for a long time.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Jim Fairholm, and I can't really think of a lot more than that. Kid Zone and Captain Hook.
What do you anticipate doing differently with Float Space that any other floating venture? Do you anticipate doing something different? And if so, what do you anticipate doing different than other float technology businesses that are in operation that you are aware of?
Yeah. There are very few float centers that go beyond just having isolation tanks. And right now I am gearing up to manufacture a residential line with
tanks.
Yeah.
Oh,
and refurbishing old tanks.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, really. That is now you're talking.
Yeah.
Now that's entrepreneurial, because here's the creativity and here's the innovation, the two cornerstones of the entrepreneurial process. Great. You have my attention.
Good.
No, we'll talk more about that in a moment. With your existing venture, Float Space Kelowna, how do you promote your business, and have you experienced any difficulties, problems, or successes with your existing venture model?
Okay, sure, yeah. I'll answer this question as a sandwich. So I've had a lot of success with social media marketing, and the big reason behind that is a lot of people have fears around floating, or aspects of it are very unfamiliar. And social media is a great platform for conveying information, educational information, content marketing, personalized between people. And that's where we've seen, most of our short-term success. The biggest problem that I have is getting the amount of information out in a digestible format for most people. There's a lot of dimensions to floating, and it's very unique to each person that comes in. Everybody has their experience, and without kind of just washing over all of these benefits, it's good for this, it's good for that. The power of floating is in its uniqueness for the individual. And that's a very, very hard thing to convey to people.
And a very personal thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interesting you've touched on that, because the very last point that I made on my pad here was, when I talk about expanding your market, I made a note: membership, exposure, and education. Because as I've mentioned to you since we've met, I think one of the biggest, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're going to agree with me, one of the biggest impediments that you may have experienced currently is lack of education. The people out the door don't necessarily have any knowledge of float technology, or therefore have no experience with it.
Right, and it's
how do you attack that?
Well, it's persistence, really. You just got to keep getting it in front of people and get creative with it. And I think the big thing that escapes most people is its applications. A lot of people look at float therapy as this environment, this space for relaxation and stress relief, which is what it's really good for as well on a very surface level. But once you learn how to get beyond the tank space itself and apply it to your life, it gets very, very, very interesting and productive. So people are using it now to enhance their creativity and problem-solving skills, to learn, to visualize skill sets, to make decisions, right? When you can get into a distraction-free environment and you can create space in your mind, creativity flows in. Novel solutions to problems and inspiration seemingly just come from your subconscious or out of the collective information field somewhere. You're getting these massive, massive insights. And when you can do it on a regular basis and build a practice out of it, your normal state of being is one of productivity, creativity, ease, and presence. It enhances many areas of your life.
Okay, Dustin, we're going to take a break now, and we'll pick it up in a moment or two. So let's just hold on, and we'll be right back with you. We're back with Dustin from Float Space, talking about the benefits of float technology to one's personal life, to one's sense of spirituality, to one's sense of well-being. Dustin, take it away.
Okay, yeah. Floating and sensory deprivation environments for mental health care are extremely cool. There's a $2 million research center in Oklahoma right now called the Lauria Institute for Brain Research and Float Clinic. It's run by a guy named Dr. Justin Feinstein. I love his name too.
Yeah, Feinstein.
Yes. And they're doing some very, very cool things. They are getting veterans in the tank that have PTSD. They are doing repetitive float sessions with people that are living with anxiety, depression, eating disorders. Now, most of the mental health care research involving flotation therapy has been using float tanks in conjunction with psychology, with counseling, group discussion, group therapy. And that's something that is missing from the industry right now. And something that we are trying to develop more at Float Space as well is how can we use the tanks in conjunction with existing practices in mental health care? Because you can get the body and mind in a very, very receptive space after floating. And so when you emerge from the tank and you have a conversation, people are much more open, and it provides a great opportunity to reprogram the relationship that we have with ourselves.
So what you're telling me is the flotation experience decreases impediments, psychological, emotional impediments that people may be experiencing relative to their environment.
Yeah, the relationship that we have with our environment and the sensations from it programs everything in our life. And when you can get away from that, you have the control, right? Thoughts are governed by just you instead of your response to the environment. And it's very, very effective for allowing people to get in touch with who they are right now and less resistant to changing that, which is a big thing for people to make positive changes in their life.
Knowing you as little as I do, but learning from you every time we meet and talk, the world is full of stress. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I myself don't feel some smatterings of stress, good or bad, because not all stress is bad, right? You can have healthy stress.
Yeah, it can motivate you.
To motivate you, that's right, to hopefully steer you in the right direction. I want to go back to something else before we go on. I want to talk about how you promote flow space. How you mentioned also,
Social media?
social media.
Right.
Okay, as a vehicle for you to promote your company.
Yes.
Is that it exclusively?
No. We really.
Well, could you dwell on that a little bit for our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm still trying to get you to help us get our viewers informed. I hesitate to use the word educated, informed about float technology. I want people to be inquisitive, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I want them to be inquisitive and knock on your door and say,
Well, me too.
This is who I am. Tell me.
Yeah. So I have a huge value of developing community. And I do see float tank centers as a foundation for future community development because of all of its applications and the unique atmosphere that surrounds isolation tanks. It's very loving, it's very compassionate, and very open, right? It's this one place in our culture, in our social operating system, that you're not expected to share an opinion if you don't want to. You don't have to have a belief. You don't have to share those beliefs. You don't have to answer me. You don't have to answer questions. But if you want to ask a question, or want to express something, want to learn how to use the tank better and connect.
One doesn't have to feel encumbered in doing so.
Yeah, by anything.
Yeah, by anything,
And so we take strides to be involved. I'm a huge supporter of the art community, Kelowna comedy. I love comedy personally, so that's something I support. The Heart School in Kelowna, Moksha Yoga, Glow Juicery, we reach out and we connect with these people because we're all trying to do something similar. And that's just grow a community, build relationships. And I do see float centers, regardless of what city they're in, as a very, very important component in that.
You're making sense to me, darn you anyways, because it's taking me broader in my thoughts. I mean, up until listening to you talk tonight, and for our viewers, Dustin and I have had a few conversations, but tonight he's taken me on a journey beyond what I've learned before we began this interview this evening, and that is this: that there's so much, and I've already heard you say that there's so much benefit for all of us, all of you viewers watching the show tonight, and those who aren't watching us. There's so much benefit. It just seems to be endless of what people can learn.
Well, we are people with infinite capacities.
Yes.
Right, and that's the cornerstone of floating. Floating in itself isn't this thing that will do something for you. A float tank is an environment, and you bring yourself into it. You bring yourself into new spaces, physiologically, mentally, emotionally. And that's a distinction I always try to make. People often see float tanks or floating as this trade-off for other habits and practices of well-being. I hear a lot of people say, well, isn't floating just like cheating for meditation? Don't I need to develop these faculties without the tank? And that's a backwards way of looking at it, because you can bring existing wellness techniques, self-observation, creative athletic visualization techniques, learning techniques into the tank with you. And because you're removing distractions at the physiological level, you have a lot more energy and attention to direct to those existing practices.
Focus.
Exactly. It's just an environment.
Environment, yeah.
And within it, it elicits a spectrum of experiences that aren't available when you're constantly responding to stimulus.
You're training me tonight.
Trying to untrain you, that's the thing.
Oh, yeah, you are, yes. Yeah, get out of the rigidity of our historical environment, the structure.
Yes.
Put down your guard, Joel Young, and open up your mind and your heart and your soul to the possibilities of
right.
what can be.
Yeah, structures and
Am
sensations
I on a
tend to be
roll?
boundaries, right?
Am I on
They're
a roll,
boundaries of thought.
Now come down with some hard information about how you would, if you aren't now, how you might or would promote the opportunities in float space. And before you answer, when I was there the other day, I noticed just in the foyer of your enterprise the word memberships.
Mm-hmm.
So let's paint a picture. I walk in the door and I say, I'm Joel Young. I'm curious first and foremost about flow technology. What are you going to do for me?
Well, first things first, we're going to get you in the tank.
Okay.
You got to try it.
Yeah.
And it costs more to float the first time than it does any other time. And the reason we don't do it the other way, like most businesses, a first float special, come in at half off, okay, is because floating gets better in time as you learn how to respond physiologically and mentally to the environment. And it's a cumulative effect. And so we provide incentives in our pricing through a membership structure that actually gets cheaper with time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, I like that. You haven't deterred me yet.
Good.
In fact, if anything, you've just about got me in the tank.
Close. We're close.
Close.
I've got a funny story.
Please.
Just to end it.
Okay.
So I'm pretty good at describing floating, I think.
You are, very much so.
Now, my own family they haven't all been in the tank because we all have these reservations and resistance to doing things for ourselves, right? So I've been explaining this at family dinners and outings and for years. And a few months ago, my aunt says to me, I might actually try this floating thing, but I don't think I could hold my breath for over an hour. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's good, because I can't either.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a requirement for floating on the surface
yeah.
of a solution.
Yeah.
So, if
I
anyone
love
has
this.
reservations,
Yeah.
they're most likely just beliefs and misconceptions around an experience that you haven't yet had. And what most people discover is they get in there, even if they feel like they might be claustrophobic, they turn off those lights, and the experience is so expansive and so familiar. Yeah, it feels like home.
Yeah.
It's very interesting and very enjoyable.
You paint such a, I mean this most sincerely, Dustin, you paint a picture tonight with our discussion. You painted a picture for me that's making so easy for me not only to understand flow technology, but you're making it easy for me to want to experience
Nothing.
Dustin, before we leave tonight, could you please tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you to talk about the float space venture and to explore with you an opportunity to experience it?
Sure, yeah. The easiest place to go is to floatspace.ca or check out Float Kelowna on Facebook.
Okay.
Give us a call, book a float online, or come into the shop and have a chat. Ask any questions. I obviously love sharing it. So.
Yeah, you do. Perfect. That's what I wanted to know before we say goodbye. Okay, we are now signing off for tonight. Thank you once again, Dustin.
Thank you.
And good night, everybody.